Hi everybody, welcome back, and great to see so much amazing chat happening, both in the kind of chat on the right hand side of your page, but in those breakout sessions and fireside chats as well. Lots and lots of really interesting activity. Remember that Padlet you can still access via the same link as well if you want to add any more ideas that have been coming up in your discussions so far, or to add to your contributions into that Padlet. We'll be, as I say, we'll be compiling that and sending out some of the things afterwards as well. Lots of questions as well coming in around how people can connect to their the other individuals on the call who are working in the same kind of regions as them as well, and we're going to have a think about how we might connect you up a bit better afterwards. So that might be we're going to look into some of the things that we'll be asking in a feedback form that we're going to put at the end. I say feedback form in inverted commas because actually it's only a couple of questions of feedback. The main purpose of that survey that we'll be sending around at the end will be to take some of these conversations further and to explore ways that we can work together and turn some of these things into a reality, when at this point we'll be looking more at the hypotheticals. But welcome back to the main stage at this point, and for this our kind of next and the remainder of our afternoon, we are going to be looking at taking a step away from the kind of content programming that we discussed earlier this morning and thinking more about the communications and marketing and the opportunities for taking that marketing and communications that we're going to be putting in at a regional level, again, to get people involved in CCNH Challenge and share the story, and how we might pull that together to activate some more national interest, and activate that national story. So we'll be doing another Padlet exercise again. So we've actually got a fresh, clean, brand new Padlet to share with you, which at the appropriate point, Ellie again will drop the link into the chat. But before we go into that, I wanted to welcome as well Helen Bell from Greenhouse PR, who we've worked with for several years on different elements, and is a real expert in taking environmental stories and taking them out into the world. So Helen, if you'd like to turn on your camera and microphone. Helen's just going to share with us a few minutes of a bit of provocation to help us get started with our discussions. So over to you, Helen.
Thank you, Matt. Hello, everybody. Really nice to be here today, and great to have the opportunity to chat to you all. I'm very excited about the City Nature Challenge, and Matt invited me to start off this particular session by talking a little bit about a campaign that we worked on this time last year. Well, it was springtime last year, so the first national lockdown when that kicked in, and it was called Vitamin N for Nature. So hopefully some of you might have heard about it. We were essentially very privileged to be working with a really exciting group of environmental organisations, and I've got a few slides. I promise it won't be death by PowerPoint, but Ellie's very kindly going to share slides for me because I discovered I was technically not able to. So I think, will they appear for me to be able to see, Matt, or is it only you guys that can see those? I'll wait.
Right. You should be able to see them as well as soon as Ellie can get them online.
Wonderful. Yeah, so I just wanted to talk a little bit about that campaign because it's got a lot of alignment with the City Nature Challenge. And essentially what we were setting out to do there was to bring together a group of national environmental charities and organisations to really encourage people to engage with nature during that first lockdown, which obviously kicked in March last year. And actually at the time, I mean, now, of course, we're all old hands at lockdown, but at the time, that felt like such a pivotal moment where people were really, starting to connect and discover nature at a local level, often for the first time, or certainly in different and new ways. So our objective was to create a campaign that got behind that. So the reason it was called Vitamin N, here we go. Thank you ever so much, Ellie. The reason it was called vitamin N for nature was about this idea that we all need to get our daily dose of nature. It's just as essential as any other vitamins for our health and well-being. So if you can just go forward to the next slide for me, Ellie, everyone will be able to see the organisations that were backing it. So some really big names there. Obviously, we were very fortunate to be working with the likes of RSPB and the National Trust and the Wildlife Trust and all of these organisations. And what happened was that we had Greenhouse, my team, and also a social impact agency called Purpose, who effectively developed the campaign, the messaging, the supporting assets, the media materials, all those sort of building blocks. And then what we did was we asked all of these partners to support it through their own channels. So they were spokespeople in the press release, for example, and they were sharing the assets across their channels. And if you can go ahead another slide for me, Ellie, I'll just very quickly recap on the objectives. So really, I mean, these will be very familiar to you, I'm sure, but what we really wanted to do, as I said, was to raise awareness of the importance of connecting with nature, even, you know, for those people that were stuck inside, living in, you know, high-rise flats, perhaps in densely populated urban areas that may not have had a garden or even a balcony. And the way that we encourage that connection was to showcase lots and lots and lots of different ideas and suggestions for how you can connect with nature, even if that has to be through a window or by creating a window box. And then we wanted to talk about the importance of nature with a long-term view. So obviously the lockdown was, as I said, that pivotal moment of connection for many. But what we wanted to do was almost recruit a whole new army of nature enthusiasts, if you will, so that beyond the lockdown, if we indeed ever get to that stage, we have people all over the country that really connected to and caring about nature. Because as we all know, if you don't care about something, you're not going to fight to protect it. If you could go on another slide for me, Ellie, I'll just talk a little bit about the results that we managed to secure. So that campaign and bringing all of those diverse voices together was very successful. I mean, obviously the lockdown in and of itself was topical back then, but what we did was we used the Easter weekend, so that long bank holiday weekend, as a sort of jumping off point to launch to the media and to launch on the social channels and to say, right, everyone, you know, this is the situation we find ourselves in. We've got the Easter weekend coming. The weather forecast was very good. And these are all the different ways that you can get out and enjoy nature. And that really resonated with lots of people. So as you can see, we got almost 250 pieces of media coverage, including 11 features in national press. There were over 2,500 posts shared with the hashtag, and we had some real highlights, one of which was working with the team at CBBC Newsround to actually develop a bespoke survey, which meant that the campaign had some longevity. And then I think the next slide, if you don't mind moving on one, just shows a bit of an overview of some of those sort of highlight pieces of coverage that we managed to secure over the course of that Easter weekend. And then another slide, Ellie, will show everyone the digital assets that were created. So the campaign had a really distinctive look and feel in these very bright primary colours. And some of those were just stats, as you can see, and calls to action. And some of them were highlighting the specific activities that we were promoting on behalf of those partners. So, you know, whether that was the RSPB breakfast bird watch, for example, that was very popular, or as you can see top left there, those were the nature yoga poses that the wildlife trusts were promoting. So a real range and a real diversity. And then I think, Ellie, there's probably one more which just talks a little bit about what we learned from the process. Thank you. So as I said, bringing together all of those organisations with a shared mission and with obviously a lot of overlap between our objectives and our messaging, that really allowed us to turn what would have otherwise perhaps been a bit lost in the noise in terms of those sort of softer messages, encouraging people to get out and about in nature, managed to give that the oomph and the amplification to create a campaign. The hashtag obviously was central to that, to unify everything that we were all doing. And actually, one of the learnings for us as a PR team was that journalists were really, really keen to get hold of some good but very quirky case studies. So it wasn't enough for them to just encourage children and families to get outside and create a bug house or a bird feeder. That was getting a little bit passé. What they really wanted was to hear about really creative, unusual ways that people were connecting with nature. So we had to do quite a lot of work behind the scenes to find those and to find those case studies, but that was really successful. So lots of stats and facts, lots of top tips, lots of case studies would be my sort of key learning to take forward for the City Nature Challenge. And one of the disadvantages we had in hindsight, which won't be an issue, I'm sure in this case, is that we lacked a coherent web presence. So obviously all the individual partners have a really strong digital presence, but we didn't have a landing page or a microsite for vitamin N. So it was quite hard to signpost people anywhere other than social media. So those were just a few slides. That's it from me on the slides, Ellie. And then I just wanted to hand back to Matt to take you through to the next stage.
Thanks so much for that, Helen. That was a fantastic sort of whistle-stop tour through that, and I think has raised a lot of thoughts and engagement. There's a couple of people who couldn't see the presentation, so can I just check that? I'm not sure if it was fair. I could see it, but I don't know if it was quite visible for everyone. But are you happy for us to share slides and things?
Of course, absolutely.
Right. I'll just put you on the spot now in front of everybody rather than you probably
no, I was just thinking if you can compress them, then all the better.
Fantastic. So, but I think what would be what kind of that flagged up for me in terms of some point of reference, and I'm sure we'll have a few more questions coming through the chat as well, was it was really interesting that you've got that core partnership of those logos of those kind of big organizations, probably who have quite a lot of internal marketing and comms resource as well compared to many of the people on the call as well. But I know from sort of being part of the wider network that was connected to the vitamin N as well, that it wasn't just pushing things through those voices, was it as well? It was kind of activating a much wider community. And whether there was much sort of learning that you thought could come from that in terms of being able to activate not just those. We've got a similar situation where we've got our kind of 10 city leading organizations who are signed up parts of the City Nature Challenge. But then we've got, we've had 100 people on this event today who obviously kind of part of that much broader network. So sort of any learning around activating beyond that core partnership as well.
Yeah, of course. Well, I mean, I think the principles apply, regardless of the sort of size of the scale of the partners that are taking part. So I think the thing that really kind of shone through for me, I suppose, is that with a bit of coordination and a bit of planning and let's be honest, a bit of hard graft at the outset, getting everybody aligned and everyone agreeing on a timeline just makes such a huge difference. So each individual organization going out and sharing this kind of content, these kind of messages on their channels is probably going to be a drop in the ocean ultimately in terms of what we want to achieve. But by bringing everyone together, and I think we were struck by it is possible if we make it as simple as we can for people to be part of it. So obviously that means creating template social posts. It means just making it really, really super easy for people to access and be part of. But even just coordinating what the key dates are when you're going to share the content so that there is that sort of natural amplification and that halo effect, it just makes such a big difference. And certainly from a media perspective, which was my particular focus for that campaign, it goes from being a kind of fairly sort of run-of-the-mill everyday sort of just as not a sufficiently hard news story to feeling like something that's much bigger than the sort of the sum of the parts being bigger, as it were.
Absolutely. I think that's a really useful kind of part of things as well. When you've got you know there's a limit to the scale of that kind of core partnership that you can put together, but it kind of gives that opportunity to be involved more widely. There's actually a question that's coming from Les Bailey as well, whose name I hope I'm pronouncing correctly. But saying, I'm concerned that we are talking to the converted, the people who already have an interest in nature. How do we reach the vast majority of people who are not in our traditional audience? And that actually feeds very nicely into our next step. But I wanted to put that to you as well, Helen, before we go into that.
It's a really good question, Les, and it was something that we were very aware of. Obviously, by working with those organisations that I mentioned, we know that a huge proportion of the audiences that they're reaching on a daily and a weekly basis are clearly the converted, as it were. But I think what we tried to do to get around that, and it was certainly something that the journalists were demanding, as I mentioned, was to really focus on the sorts of activities that could be undertaken from anywhere. So we were very much trying to keep, the family in the high-rise tower block in mind. They don't have access to a garden, and there might be all sorts of reasons why they can't get out to the nearest park or green space. And we really wanted to think about fun ways to engage those families with nature. And obviously some of those are more obvious things like bird watching, through a window, but we were trying to put a bit of a twist on those to make them feel a bit fresher. And that's where the sort of top 5, top 10 activities really came to life, just creating those assets and those corresponding social graphics that you saw, hopefully you saw if you were one of the people that could see the slides. But yeah, I totally take your point, and I think it is always a challenge to overcome with these sorts of campaigns.
Thank you very much, Helen. And I've got another question as well that's coming from Kathy as well, which is a more practical question, which again leads very nicely into our next step. So what I might do is, if we sort of end our bit of Q&A there with you, Helen, thank you very much for all of your input, and then think about taking sort of both Kathy's point there about, is there a UK City Nature Challenge website, which comes into the next phase of the session, but also the Les's question about audiences, and bring those into the next part as well. So I just thank you again on behalf of everybody, and Helen, if you wanted to hide away as well from your camera, I would just say thank you very much, and we'll go on to the next portion. So thanks again, everybody. That's so with everything that we've just heard from Helen in mind going forwards, and thinking about these provocations that we've had as well, we've designed another bit of an exercise for you. So if Ellie or Stu, you can drop into the chat our next Padlet link. Fresh, clean Padlet, all about the marketing side. And actually what we wanted to do with this Padlet was to start off with that question that Les just put to us all, of saying, what are the audiences that we are trying to reach here? And we are all different organizations. We have things in common which bring us together on this platform today, but also we have different organizational agendas, different individual agendas, and different priorities, and who we might be trying to reach through our activity linked to City Nature Challenge. And Ellie, if you want to do the same again with the screen sharing, hoping that it starts behaving itself a little bit more this afternoon as well, and sort of show us around the Padlet again. There we go. But so in this space, what we'd really like you to do is, again, in a big kind of Post-it note dump of dropping on here lots of ideas of who is your priority, who do you want to be speaking to through the City Nature Challenge space. And again, don't worry too much about overlap. Actually, if we have lots of duplicates, it just shows that that's a really important thing to look at. So do start dropping and populating things in there. For anyone who missed the first round of this, so this platform is called Padlet. The link in the chat will take you directly to it. And in order to drop a Post-it note on the wall, you double click and it will make a Post-it note magically appear. Ellie will just demonstrate that now. You can see lots of people already adding, and then you can just type into that space there. There's and once it is created, there we go. Then you get this little menu when you hover over it above, and that allows you to change the color and things like that. Again, we'll keep things white for now so that we can do some color coding afterwards. But also you can then there's a little heart button at the bottom left and a comments box as well, so that you can add you can show your appreciation for that idea, and you can add little comments as well. So lots of ideas already starting to populate on here. We've got lots of things going. And I think, yes, Sue, good to raise the question of Post-it note etiquette, of really keeping it to one idea per Post-it note. That makes it easier for us to move things around and cluster them shortly. Lots of people adding some detail there. Great to have some of that expansion of idea, but again, trying to keep that to that idea of one idea per note as well. And what we'll be looking to do shortly after this, once we've got a nice little cluster of groups, a nice little pile of Post-it notes coming together, is we'll do a little bit of clustering like we did with the first one as well. So if you can keep things kind of in an area where we can see where things are. I think in the first round we had quite a lot of spread across quite a large area and had to bring everything back together. But lots of ideas already coming up for audiences, and I think I wouldn't put too much worry about how we're organizing. I think there is a tendency to see whether we have a kind of national and local split in different ways, but do feel free to go as specific as you would like on here as well, whether that's down to whether that's demographically, whether that's a particular street, a particular area, maybe with a little bit of a note of explanation if there's a particular place of interest to you. But we had, for example, I've had long conversation with Lucy, who many of you will have seen in one of the sessions this morning, talking about engaging people in Bath and looking at Twerton is a particular area of Bath that is an area of an area of deprivation that is really a priority for a lot of different programs that overlap as well. So there's specific areas, there's postcodes, maybe not down to an individual's house, but go as specific or as general as you like as well. So things starting to come together. If yours is one of the Post-it notes that seems to have kind of dropped right down to the bottom or far off to the right-hand side, if you can sort of draw things back together as much as possible, just so that we can see we don't lose anything off the dropping off the end. But then what I think will be good is if we go straight into now that we've got a really nice collection of ideas, is into the same as we did in the session this morning of pulling them out into some clusters of related audiences that have things in common as well. So again, just kind of pick a Post-it, move it to a relatively blank part of the Padlet, and start clustering things that make sense to it around it. With quite a lot of us in the Padlet at the same time, it will obviously mean that some people try to pick it up at the same time and things like that. Just try to be a little bit patient with each other, but do feel free to sort of have a little silent argument about moving things between groups and things like that. And I'll ask Ellie to, as sort of headings start to emerge out of that, then we can start giving some things some topic headings, which I think we can mark in a different color. There we go, purple. And again there, so you can just see that Ellie, if you're watching this in Hopin and aren't off in Padlet, then you can see Ellie, where Ellie is splitting those groups that have started to emerge into where an idea has started to diverge into two different sections there around schools and separate from young people as well. So if everyone can just have a go at really kind of pulling out, and again, it can be a bit messy. It's it can. We might get a couple of the same group starting to crop up, but just to kind of crowdsource some of this sourcing as well, so we can see where things connect together. Fab. So we're starting to see some trends emerging. Fab. And Ellie, if you want to, because I'm not actually in the Padlet at the moment, I might ask Ellie if you wanted to just share. Oh, turn your microphone on for a second. Maybe just share some of the headings that are starting to emerge.
Sure. So there's loads going on with this Padlet, which is brilliant. So many great ideas. So we've got a few headings here in purple of community groups. There was a note as well about engaging with not necessarily nature groups. There's another Padlet here about dog walkers could be kind of one of those groups. We've also got lots about young people. So targeting schools specifically, but families with young children as well. Just going to have a scroll up here.
Oh yeah, there's lots going in. So I think what we can do is if we carry on with some of that clustering and moving things around there as well, and Ellie, if you can help drive some of that and pulling together, then what I think one of the things that we wanted to do next with this exercise was we've got a load of ideas here for audiences that we might want to reach, but one of the next phases that we might have, and we talked about reaching beyond those people that we're already talking to, would be thinking about not how we reach every individual of each different things of this, but actually thinking about who might be the influencers, which I know is a kind of loaded term nowadays and particularly speaks to social media. But if we think sort of beyond that in terms of, leaders in communities that we are interested in talking to, people whose have platforms and voices that we can target to help spread this message as well, so that their audiences kind of come along with them. Who might some of those influencers be that we might want to attach to some of these areas? And what I'd like you to do, again, is to start adding influencers to this Padlet. And that could be, community leaders. It could be a specific person. It could be, you can say Boris Johnson if you want. But let's put some things down who are specific. But what I would like you to do is, with each of those that are influencers, is if you could change the color of your Post-it note. If we pick the color green to be an influencer color, then that would be, then we can help pick those out and separate them out from the audiences, because of course there'll be times where some of the audiences that we might be talking about here could also be influencers. So if you can start adding influencers to your to here as well, try to put them near to the clusters that are starting to be labeled with purple as well. Thinking about who those clusters are and who would be the people that we would want to get in touch with to help us activate and access those audiences as well. And again, that might be local, that might be a specific person, that might be your mayor, that might be or other elected officials. It might be an Instagram influencer. It might be teachers. Who is holding the communications power that we need to tap into in order to access these audiences. I can see lots of green already appearing on the Padlet as well. Ellie, do you want to kind of jump back in again and let us know some of the things that are coming up as well?
Hi, sure. So there's an interesting cluster around here about, I say round here, I've got to find it again now, about people who are perhaps doing things outdoors, but not necessarily aware of or are wildlife enthusiasts, or might be aware of something like City Nature Challenge. So engaging with those audiences.
So lots, and there's some suggestions there. Are there some sort of influencer ideas coming out in that cluster as well, or is that somewhere we want people to concentrate some of their ideas?
Yeah, it'd be great to have some more ideas about how to reach those people and those influencers around here.
I suppose there's quite an interesting sort of spin-off conversation. I don't know if anyone came across there was an article in The Guardian a couple of weeks ago. Of course, The Guardian, speaking of reaching beyond the usual suspects, but talking about this lockdown walking craze. Essentially, it's the only thing that any of us have been allowed to do for the last year and a half has been going on walks, and there's plenty of feeling going that's kind of quite obvious out in wider society around being a bit fed up with walking our local streets. And it was an article that was very interesting. It was about this idea of walking with purpose and how to reinvigorate the idea of going out for a walk, where instead of walking being the purpose for going out, having a narrative, having a story to tell on your walk that helps to make that walk more of an interesting thing. And it feels like City Nature Challenge and wildlife recording, it's one of those, it feels like a real win for the moment. And actually, this, we've talked about going back to normal potentially, but is this a time where we've got one chance here to really capitalize on the fact that there is a real need in the mainstream to have something to do that has purpose, that connects you with the outdoors, because you're looking at things closely in order to record it, that actually we can attach that to this walking with purpose note as well. Ellie, I think you might have your microphone on and we might have some background noise.
Sorry.
That's all right. I think we can probably hear your mouse moving around. We've got a couple. Sorry. No, you go. I was just going to address a couple of the comments in the chat, but do go ahead and I'll come back.
Brilliant. There's a few notes here about influencers and people drawing out individuals, which is quite interesting. So we've had a note of, and particularly those, we've got one on Instagram, those influencers on Instagram, and perhaps the influence they might have on young audiences. We've got another one here of Bird Girl, Maya Rose Craig, and also the Urban Birder, so David Lindo as well.
So some ambassadors within the sector, as it were, but who are kind of pushing out into beyond the usual suspects as well.
Exactly.
That's right. I've got a couple of comments that have come up in the chat as well. We've got Caroline has said, sort of, who do influencers influence? I feel their influence is waning, which is a very enigmatic statement as well. Caroline, I don't know if you want to sort of elaborate a little bit, either in the chat. Oh, no, it'll have to be in the chat, actually. I don't have the functionality to invite you on stage, I'm afraid. But if you wanted to elaborate a little bit on that, it's sort of a very, it feels quite an enigmatic point as well. And Victoria say, ironically, walking a lot less, as no longer need to get to the train station. I sort of similarly feel I'm doing much less walking in itself, because I'm not walking on my commute, but also but I am doing more kind of walks to get out of the house as well. So I wonder if that's there'll be interesting trends there in different parts of society. Ben as well flagging that we might need to be mindful about whether or not stopping to observe is technically allowable. And an example from Pokemon Go being outside. Oh, Caroline talking about the yes, this is my current affairs knowledge being limited. The backlash of a Good Morning Britain influencer. As well, substantial number of people who do not use social media as well. I think that's a really good point, Les, as well. Looking at people who there's a real challenge with all these kinds of activities where we're doing a lot of online work, where there's a large number of people who don't have access to these online platforms as well, and so how might we engage with them specifically? And I think that that's almost kind of a whole set, a different approach is needed, isn't it? To and maybe if there's a cluster around people with low technological access, for example. That could be a whole other cluster and ways of influence. Yeah, some of these things around kind of the policies around that. So there may be actually some of these conversation that's going on rails in response to Ben's comment about what's allowed and what people might get stopped by police for. I suppose there's potentially a central need there for some advice and some guidance for people who are participating around how that can be managed. I know that in 2020, when we were delivering through lockdown, there was a bit of regional difference in how the different cities organised some of that. So for example, in the parks in London, I know that there was a very strong message of not encouraging people to be going out doing this activity in parks as part of their exercise, because the tone of the way that the guidance was being policed there was incredibly strong. Certainly out here in the west of England, we weren't seeing that kind of issue being raised, and there was certainly more of a tolerant approach to people interpreting that at the time it was the 1 hour outside rule for as part of their walk as well. Lots and lots of being inspired as well from that chat as well coming through. I'm not sure I'll be able to keep up with it all, but huge amounts coming in through the Padlet as well. So it's a really, really productive discussion. What I'd like to do as well is, so we have got about 20 minutes left of our time together, and what I wanted to make sure that we do is that we give you an opportunity as well. So we've pulled together these two Padlets. They are still open. You're very welcome to contribute to this and the previous one as well, and continue to build in there. I think there's what we've also got is we've got a link to a survey, which I mentioned, that will be an opportunity for you to both feedback a little bit on this, on today's workshop, conference, event that we've put together, and how you've found it, so that we can learn a bit more about how we do these sorts of things in the future. But the main purpose of that survey is really to hear from you about what would be the most useful ways that we and others who are kind of leading in the cities can pull together to help make some of this stuff happen. So in terms of, like, as Helen was mentioning around the vitamin N program, they had that kind of central coordination and pooling, and provided some useful activities. We've done a little bit of that in the past at the Natural History Consortium. We've worked with the other city leaders to host some of that activity, and I've now forgotten who asked, but there was somebody, it's scrolled all the way too far, Kathy asked as well about a central City Nature Challenge website for the UK, as well, separate from the national one. We did we hosted one in 2020 and before that actually. So yeah, the last couple of years we have hosted a small section on the UK BioBlitz website that has been dedicated to City Nature Challenge, and we're hoping to have something a little bit more robust up and running this year that will have a little bit better functionality than we've had to cope with in the last couple of years, if all timelines linking together. So hopefully that is a resource that we'll be able to pull together, and I think part of the population of that with activity would be really good to be as an idea for signposting all of the stuff that we can do locally but also collaboratively. That we'll draw certainly from these Padlets. But one of the things in that survey will be kind of some of what do you think would be some of the most useful things that would help you to engage in the City Nature Challenge in the UK this year, and also some things around contact details if you wish to share them with us on there with a bit more detail than what you signed up for this event with, so that we can connect you up with other activities and activate some of these opportunities. Also, if you have any kind of really specific thoughts on what we could do, you can drop them in the chat here, and we will be collecting all of this chat and putting it together, but also in that survey that we're going to send around. So if I can ask Stu or Ellie as well to drop that link, there we are, into the chat, and maybe pin it as well. And if you want to take a few minutes to fill in some of that activity while it's free in your mind, while it's fresh in your mind, then you are very welcome to. We've got a final few minutes to before we need to wrap up. I think what would be if we have any more questions from the chat that I have missed out or we want to pick out. There we go. So we've got a little bit more time there on the Padlets, but what I might do is, since we have managed to wrap ourselves up somewhat early, I think I felt like there was going to be a bit slower going on getting everyone going on Padlet, but you've all launched into it so quickly. What we might do is, I'll address this one more question and then I'll wrap us up for the time being as well. So I've got a question from Rachel Webster. Are we still going to be using the CNC UK Slack channel this year for collaborative work? So we have those of you who are leading city activity for City Nature Challenge will know about the Slack channel that we have for the international City Nature Challenge, and we've created a sub channel of that for the UK. That is one of the options that we have for collaborative work, and it's part of what we have in this feedback survey as well, is whether that would be still a useful platform for everyone to use. I think it's since it has connections to the other ones, it will be useful as well, or whether we need to do something slightly different to that to make it more accessible to those outside who are not leading city groups as well. We may need something additional to the Slack channel to be able to include the wider community as well. So to give you back a little bit more time to continue to look into those Padlets, and to you can also continue to make use of some of the other formats in Hopin. So, for example, there's the networking function, which will pay you up for a timed speed dating style networking with someone else in the group, or you can continue to chat to each other in the chat. I will wrap things up there and say thank you very much to everybody for your contributions and additions. As I say, do fill in that form as well, so that it can be, so that we can connect you back up to all of the activity, and do continue to add to the Padlets. But for now, thank you very much, and have a wonderful weekend. Thank you.